There are moments in life when everything feels uncertain, when the world seems too complex, when chaos presses in from every side, and when we find ourselves wondering if there's any real order left in the world. 12. Rules for life. An antidote. To chaos begins in this very place, with that sense of confusion that modern life so often brings. Jordan B. Peterson, a Canadian psychologist and professor, opens his book not as a preacher of rules, but as a man deeply concerned with the human condition. The book's title may sound simple, but its heart beats with something ancient, a blend of psychology, philosophy, and timeless moral wisdom. He proposes 12 rules, each one like a torch to guide us through the darkness of chaos. They are not commandments in a religious sense, but signposts for meaning in an age of disorientation. Why we need rules. The book opens with a foreword by Dr. Norman Doidge, who paints a vivid picture of why rules, though often resisted, are vital. Doidge reminds us that human beings are naturally ambivalent about structure. We crave freedom, yet without rules, freedom decays into chaos. He recalls the story of Moses and the Ten Commandments, a reminder that when humanity rejects moral law, it often reverts to worshiping false idols, descending into disorder and self-destruction. Doidge describes Peterson as a man obsessed, not with power, but with truth, someone who has spent decades studying why people suffer and how ideology, cruelty, and chaos infect the world. Peterson, he explains, is not a political ideologue, but a moral psychologist, one who believes that before we attempt to fix society, we must first set our own houses in order. It's a call to responsibility. In a world obsessed with rights, Peterson argues that meaning comes from duty, from what we take on, not from what we demand. And as Doidge foreshadows, that's the theme running beneath every one of the 12 rules. Order and chaos. Before Peterson begins his rules, he offers an overture, a kind of philosophical prelude. He explains how the book began as an answer to a simple question on the website Quora. What are the most valuable things everyone should know? His list of short, often blunt principles. Stand up straight, tell the truth, do not hide things in the fog. Struck a global nerve. People wanted guidance, structure, meaning. That viral list became the seed of this book. But Peterson's ideas didn't come out of nowhere. He had spent decades studying myth, religion, neuroscience, and human behavior. His earlier academic work, Maps of Meaning, explored how humans use stories and symbols to navigate between the two eternal forces that shape existence, order and chaos. Order is the known, the structured world of rules, routine, and predictability. Chaos is the unknown, the realm of uncertainty, danger, and transformation. Peterson argues that every human life unfolds between these two poles. Too much order, and life becomes tyrannical and lifeless. Too much chaos, and it collapses into confusion and fear. The goal, he says, is not to eliminate chaos, but to find meaning by standing on the border between both, where responsibility meets adventure. That's where the 12 rules live, in that delicate balance point where life is both structured and alive. Rule 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders. The first rule begins not with people, but with lobsters. Peterson tells the story of these ancient crustaceans who, for hundreds of millions of years, have lived in dominance hierarchies. When two lobsters fight, their posture and chemistry change. The victor stands tall and confident, filled with serotonin, while the defeated one collapses inward, its body curled, its spirit crushed. The winner becomes more likely to win again. The loser expects to lose. This biological story is more than trivia. Peterson uses it to reveal a deep truth about human psychology. Posture is a metaphor for attitude. When you stand up straight, when you hold your head high and your shoulders back, you are signaling to the world and to your own nervous system that you are ready to take on life. You are accepting responsibility. You are acknowledging your place in the hierarchy of existence. He explains that humans, like lobsters, live in hierarchies that are not mere social constructs. They are ancient, rooted in biology itself. Competence, not power, usually determines who rises. When you slouch through life, you're telling yourself that you're defeated before you even start. Your body lies to your mind, and your mind obeys. Peterson connects this to the larger struggle of existence. Life is hard. It is filled with suffering and tragedy. But standing tall is an act of defiance against despair. It's a declaration that, despite pain, you are willing to carry the burden of being. Standing up straight is not about arrogance. It's about readiness. It's saying, I am prepared for the adventure of life. In that act of courage, you start to transform chaos into order. Rule 2. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Imagine this. Peterson says, people often give their pets their medicine faithfully, yet fail to take their own prescribed medication. Why? Because deep down, many don't treat themselves as someone worthy of care. They feel unworthy, guilty, or indifferent to their own suffering. Peterson draws from biblical and psychological ideas to explain this. In the story of Genesis, humans are made in the image of God. That idea, he says, isn't a metaphysical claim so much as a moral truth. You have inherent value, and you bear responsibility for that value. To neglect yourself is not humility, it's a form of moral failure. The rule challenges a subtle kind of self-deception. People often think self-care is selfish, but Peterson argues the opposite. Caring for yourself properly allows you to become stronger, more responsible, and more compassionate toward others. Just as a caregiver must be healthy to help a patient, you must be balanced to contribute to the world. He urges readers to imagine themselves as someone they love, a friend, a child, a spouse, and ask, what would I do to help this person live well? Then, do the same for yourself. That means eating well, sleeping enough, speaking truthfully, and not indulging in what corrodes your soul. To treat yourself as someone you are responsible for helping is to accept that your life matters, not just to you, but to the people who depend on you. You have a moral duty to bring out your best self, and that begins by caring for your own being. Rule 3. Make friends with people who want the best for you. We become the company we keep. Peterson reminds us that human beings are highly imitative creatures. We reflect the attitudes and values of those around us, often without realizing it. Friends are not just companions, they are forces that shape your soul. He warns against confusing niceness or shared misery with genuine friendship. There are people who will pull you down, not because they hate you, but because your improvement threatens the fragile justification of their own failures. If you rise, they must confront their unwillingness to do the same, and so they subtly sabotage your growth through mockery, guilt, or pity. Peterson tells stories of clients and personal experiences where this pattern repeats endlessly. People trapped in toxic circles, clinging to friends who keep them small. Out of misplaced loyalty or guilt, they stay. But he insists, you cannot help someone who does not want to improve. Compassion does not mean enabling self-destruction. Instead, seek those who genuinely want the best for you, people who celebrate your success, who tell you the truth, and who challenge you to be better. Those friendships might be fewer, but they are gold. They push you toward order, competence, and virtue. In a world where loneliness and envy are common, Rule 3 is about aligning yourself with allies of goodness. Life is too short to share your path with those who walk willingly into chaos. Rule 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. In a world of constant comparison, this rule is one of Peterson's most compassionate insights. He begins by describing how modern life, especially through social media, amplifies envy. At any given moment, you can see someone richer, more attractive, more accomplished, or more admired. The result? A relentless sense of inadequacy. Peterson argues that this habit of comparison poisons the soul. When you constantly measure yourself against others, you become blind to your own progress. You forget that life isn't a single competition. It's a personal journey through chaos toward order. Every person starts from a different place, faces different burdens, and possesses different gifts. He urges us to shift focus inward. Instead of asking, am I as good as that person? Ask, am I better than I was yesterday? Even a small improvement, waking up earlier, being kinder, or organizing a messy room, is a victory. Those incremental steps accumulate into transformation. Peterson explains that meaning comes not from external validation, but from progress. Life is made bearable when we see that our actions matter, that we are capable of growth, however modest. You can't control what others achieve, but you can control what direction you're moving. He compares this mindset to steering a ship. If you're lost at sea, don't curse the winds or envy another captain. Just adjust your course, even slightly, toward the destination you desire. The satisfaction of honest progress will outshine the emptiness of comparison. The heart of Rule 4 is humility. Accept that perfection is impossible, but improvement is always within reach. Rule 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Peterson turns now to parenting, and, by extension, to the question of authority itself. He begins with a blunt truth. Parents who fail to discipline their children are not being kind. They are avoiding conflict at the cost of their children's development. He describes the modern tendency to overindulge children, to treat them as equals before they have earned maturity. But a child without boundaries becomes chaotic, testing limits, manipulating weakness, and eventually facing rejection from the world. Peterson warns that undisciplined children are not just unpleasant. They are destined for pain, because society will not tolerate the behaviors that their parents ignored. He recalls his own clinical experiences with families where children became tyrants, ruling the home through tantrums and threats. The parents, often afraid of damaging the child's self-esteem, surrendered authority. The result wasn't happiness, it was resentment, chaos, and despair. Peterson's advice is clear. Children need discipline, not because parents crave control, but because children crave structure. A well-disciplined child learns respect, empathy, and competence, the qualities that make them socially successful and personally confident. He reminds readers that every no a parent says is a vote for the child's future. Discipline, when done with love, teaches a child how to navigate the boundaries of the real world, where actions have consequences and where respect must be earned. This rule extends beyond parenting. It's a microcosm of all social order. Without boundaries, love decays into chaos. To raise good children, and to live as good adults, we must be willing to face conflict today for peace tomorrow. Rule 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. This is perhaps one of the book's most powerful and haunting chapters. It begins with a question every angry or disillusioned person has asked: why is the world so unjust? Peterson doesn't dismiss the question. He acknowledges that life can be unbearably cruel. People suffer unfairly. Evil exists. Tragedy is unavoidable. But then he asks a harder question. Before you judge existence itself, before you condemn society, God, or fate, have you set your own house in order? Have you done all you can to bring order to your personal world? He tells stories of individuals who confronted terrible suffering. The Russian author Alexander Solzhenitsyn, for instance, who endured the Soviet gulags. Instead of collapsing into bitterness, Solzhenitsyn used his suffering as fuel for moral clarity. He examined his own conscience, accepted his share of responsibility, and told the truth about the evil he had witnessed. His book, The Gulag Archipelago, helped bring down an empire. Peterson contrasts this with those who respond to pain by blaming others or by adopting destructive ideologies that justify resentment and revenge. He reminds us that history is full of people who used personal chaos as an excuse to unleash horror on the world. The rules lesson is deeply personal. Begin by cleaning your room, literally and metaphorically. Organize your space, your habits, your relationships. Take care of what's yours. Don't speak as though you have the moral authority to fix humanity when your own life is in disarray. It's not that you must be perfect before speaking, but that moral credibility begins with responsibility. By setting your own house in order, you create a foundation of integrity from which real influence can grow. Peterson says, start small. Stop doing what you know is wrong. Say what you mean. Make your bed. Pay attention. Gradually, the order you build inside will ripple outward, transforming your world in ways you cannot predict. Only then, he says, are you ready to criticize, not from bitterness, but from wisdom. Rule 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Here lies the beating heart of 12 Rules for Life. If the book has a single unifying message, This is it. Peterson begins by contrasting two ways of living: the path of expedience, doing what is easy, convenient, or immediately rewarding, and the path of meaning, which demands sacrifice, responsibility, and long-term purpose. He traces this back to the dawn of human consciousness, to the story of Adam and Eve, and the birth of suffering and moral awareness. When humans became self-conscious, they realized their own vulnerability and mortality. From that moment, we've lived with the knowledge that life is suffering. The question then becomes, given that life is tragic, what should we do? Peterson's answer is clear: pursue what is meaningful. Meaning, he explains, is the antidote to chaos. It's not happiness, which is fleeting, but the deep sense that your actions matter. Meaning arises when you take responsibility for something beyond yourself, when you bear a burden willingly, even joyfully. It could be caring for a child, building a business, defending truth, or alleviating suffering, anything that serves a good greater than your comfort. He contrasts this with expedience, the temptation to lie, cheat, or cut corners to avoid pain. Expedience is the whisper of immediate gratification. Why sacrifice now when you can have pleasure today? But, he warns, expedience always leads to resentment and emptiness, because it ignores the deep structure of reality, that every good thing comes with sacrifice. Peterson explores this idea through the story of Cain and Abel. Cain, consumed by jealousy toward his favored brother, sacrifices poorly, half-heartedly, and when his offering is rejected, he turns his bitterness into violence. Abel, by contrast, sacrifices fully, sincerely, and accepts reality's harshness with humility. Meaning, Peterson suggests, comes when we act like Abel, when we face suffering without corruption. To live meaningfully, then, is to accept the tragic conditions of life and respond with voluntary responsibility. Every act of courage in the face of suffering is a small triumph of order over chaos. Peterson writes that meaning is what makes life worth the suffering. This rule is both a warning and a promise. The path of meaning is hard, but it is the only path that leads to a life worth living. Rule 8. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie if. Rule 7 is the heart of the book. Rule 8 is its spine. It's about integrity, about aligning your speech with reality. Peterson insists that lies, even small ones, are corrosive. They distort your relationship with the world, fragment your character, and turn you into a puppet of your own falsehoods. He tells the story of how lies begin. Perhaps you twist the truth to avoid conflict or to make yourself look good. Maybe you lie to protect someone's feelings. But each time you do, you create a tiny split between who you are and who you pretend to be. Over time, those splits form cracks, and through those cracks, chaos seeps in. Peterson doesn't present truth-telling as a moral cliché. He treats it as a psychological necessity. When you lie, you're no longer living in reality. You're playing a game with shadows, forcing others to play along. The longer you maintain it, the more your world becomes unreal, until eventually it collapses. Truth, he argues, is what stabilizes life. To tell the truth is to face existence as it is, with all its pain, beauty, and complexity. It's to refuse manipulation, to refuse self-deception. Sometimes truth is dangerous. It can cost you comfort, relationships, or status. But the alternative, living a lie, is far worse. Lies breed resentment, self-contempt, and despair. Peterson acknowledges that perfect truthfulness may be impossible. Sometimes we don't even know what's true. That's why he adds the crucial qualifier, or at least don't lie. If you cannot yet tell the whole truth, at least stop speaking what you know is false. That act alone begins to purify your character. He describes his own transformation as a young man, when he began consciously avoiding lies, noticing how, over time, his words and his thoughts began to align, and how his life grew more coherent and meaningful. Truth, he says, is not something you possess. It's something you serve, and in serving it, you build strength, dignity, and genuine peace. Rule 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something. You don't. This rule shifts from speaking to listening, from expressing truth to receiving it. Peterson argues that genuine listening is one of the rarest and most powerful acts of humility. Most people, he observes, don't truly listen. They prepare their rebuttal while the other person is still talking. But to truly listen, is to risk being changed. He describes conversation as a sacred process, a mutual search for truth, not a battle to win. When you listen with openness, you invite the unknown into your world. You allow chaos, the new, the unexpected, to reshape your order. Peterson connects this to his experience as a clinical psychologist. When he listens to clients, he doesn't impose solutions. He lets them speak until they find their own wisdom. He has seen that if you truly listen to someone, especially someone suffering, you often give them something miraculous, the experience of being understood. And when people feel understood, they can begin to heal. But listening, he says, requires courage. It means admitting that your own perspective might be incomplete. It means giving up the pleasure of being right in exchange for the possibility of learning something new. He warns against the arrogance of assuming you already know everything. Each person, no matter how flawed, knows something you don't. They've seen the world from a position you never have. If you approach them with humility, you can integrate their perspective into your own, becoming wiser and more compassionate. Listening is not weakness. It's disciplined openness. It's how individuals, relationships, and even societies grow. The act of listening, Peterson concludes, is one of the most profound forms of love, because it acknowledges the other person's divine potential for truth. Rule 10. Be precise in your speech words. Peterson says, are not just sounds, they are the tools we use to bring order out of chaos. To speak carefully is to think clearly, and to think clearly is to act properly. He begins this rule with a psychological truth. When people avoid naming their problems, those problems grow. When you ignore what's wrong in your marriage, your work, or your health, the undefined chaos festers in the dark. But the moment you name it, clearly, specifically, truthfully, you begin to confront it. That's the power of precise speech. Peterson reminds us that in Genesis, the world is created through speech, and God said, "Let there be light." Words separate light from darkness, the known from the unknown. In our own lives, the same process occurs. When we articulate what we fear, what we desire, what we believe, we shine light on the unknown and transform chaos into order. He describes how couples, families, and organizations fall apart when people speak vaguely. Instead of saying, "I'm hurt because you ignored me," someone says, "You never care about me," and the argument becomes a cloud of resentment. Vagueness prevents healing. Precision makes truth possible. Being precise, however, requires courage. It forces you to define reality, to take responsibility for what's actually happening. Peterson warns that imprecision often hides cowardice. We avoid saying what we mean because we fear the consequences. But that avoidance doesn't make problems disappear. It only ensures that they return, stronger and more destructive. To be precise in speech is to commit to reality. It means identifying problems accurately, setting clear goals, and communicating honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. The discipline of precision, Peterson argues, is what builds wisdom, integrity, and genuine peace. He concludes this rule with a challenge. Speak carefully, truthfully, and concretely. Don't blur your thoughts to avoid pain. Only the precisely spoken truth can cut through chaos and make life bearable. Rule 11. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding this. Rule at first sounds simple, even strange, but it carries one of Peterson's most powerful commentaries on courage, risk, and the modern world. He begins by observing boys performing dangerous tricks on skateboards, flying down railings, falling, getting hurt, and trying again. They're testing themselves, pushing their limits, and he notices how adults often rush to stop them, to make things safer, to remove every risk. But in doing so, he says, we rob the young of something essential, the chance to grow brave. Peterson explains that human development, especially for boys and young men, depends on voluntary confrontation with danger. By facing risk, we learn competence. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the mastery of it. When society overprotects its youth, it breeds fragility, resentment, and weakness. He links this to a broader cultural issue, the tendency to smother masculinity under suspicion and control. In his view, society has become overly safe, overly managed, terrified of aggression, risk, or hierarchy. But healthy strength, he argues, is not tyranny. A strong man, properly disciplined, protects rather than destroys. The same applies to women and children. Growth requires facing the edge, testing limits, and daring to fail. Peterson's warning is not just for parents, it's for civilization. A society that shields its citizens from all discomfort produces dependency, not resilience. We must allow people, especially the young, to encounter danger voluntarily, to fail, to rise, and to become capable. The rule's title, "Do Not Bother Children When They Are Skateboarding," becomes a metaphor for something deeper. Do not crush the spirit that strives upward. The world doesn't need safety without meaning. It needs strength with virtue. Let the kids ride. Let them fall. Let them learn what it means to get back up. Rule 12. Pet a cat. When you encounter one on the street, the final rule is quiet, poetic, and deeply human. After the intellectual intensity of the previous chapters, Peterson ends with a reflection on mortality, suffering, and grace. He tells the story of his daughter, who suffered from severe arthritis as a child, a condition that left her in constant pain and required countless surgeries. Watching her endure such suffering nearly broke him. In those years, Peterson learned that sometimes there is no fixing, no rational explanation for life's cruelty. All that remains is the question of how to live amid suffering. That's where the cat comes in. When life feels unbearable, Peterson says, look for small moments of beauty. A cat sunning itself, a bird singing, a kind word from a stranger. These moments do not erase the pain, but they remind you that even within suffering, there is grace. They are glimpses of meaning, fragile, fleeting, but real. He extends this rule into a meditation on tragedy. Everyone suffers. Everyone loses someone they love. The world is full of injustice and pain. Yet amid all that, there are still small things that make life worth living. Love, laughter, art, sunlight, kindness. Paying attention to those moments doesn't deny tragedy. It redeems it. Peterson calls this attitude bearing the unbearable. It's not naive optimism. It's a defiant act of hope. When you pet a cat on the street, or notice anything small and beautiful, you're choosing to live, even when life hurts. You're affirming that being itself, despite its cruelty, is still good. The rule closes the circle of the book. In Rule 1, we stood tall against the chaos of life. Now in Rule 12, we learn to kneel, to appreciate its quiet miracles.